and welcome to Reporters, Targa Communications podcast series where we swap seats with well-known property journalists and editors and ask them about the property market and their careers in journalism. I'm Andrew Barber, sometimes known as Paddy, and today I'm talking to Graham Parker, editor of Retail Destination magazine, also editor of MIPIM News. Publication is printed each day during the annual property jamboree of MIPIM and MAPIC in Cannes. Hello Graham, and come on down to the comfy seating. How are you?
I'm not bad at all, Paddy, thanks. This is a refreshing change. Normally I'm the guy the other side of the desk asking questions.
Well, that's really the whole idea, you see, turning the tables on you. Turning the tables. and how have you been getting on with lockdown, remote working? Is there any difference in the way you've been working? How's that gone for you?
I don't want to sound smug, but it's the way I've worked for the past 30 years. So in that sense, I haven't really noticed any big difference. I've been working from home since I went freelance at the beginning of the 1990s. So I'm very familiar with it. The thing I am missing, though, is meeting up with people face to face.
Yeah.
Zoom's great. It's been a lifesaver for many businesses, but you don't quite pick up on the same body language. You don't have the same interaction through a screen as you do face to face.
No, it's been very tricky, hasn't it? I mean, I've worked at home a lot, so like you say, it's for some respects it's not much different. But I can see others in the world of publishing, media, but also office workers generally who weren't prepared. This has been quite a challenge, but you've coped all right.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, it's normally summer's my fallow period. Once MIPIM finishes, things are a bit quiet for me through till probably July, August, when MAPIC kicks in. And with MIPIM moving back, or a MIPIM event moving back until September, I've been busier through the summer than I normally would be, which is a good thing.
Yeah, you don't want to complain about being busy.
No, plenty of people aren't busy at the moment, so I'll keep quiet about it.
This is true. So just briefly, give us a quick rundown how you got into journalism, how you got into property journalism and specifically retail property.
Yeah, they're all linked in some ways. I did English at university, and like too many people who do English at university, I thought I could write. So the idea of becoming a journalist always appealed to me. And that was absolutely cringe if I had to read now, I'm sure. But so I went up for a few jobs when I met a few editors when I graduated. And the route into journalism was very different in those days. You typically trained on a local paper. It wasn't a graduate profession, as they like to call it now. It was you served an apprenticeship on a local paper, and if you were lucky, you graduated up to London on a national or a big trade paper. Now, obviously, I'd missed out on that, and I wasn't quite prepared to go back to the very bottom and start again. So a couple of editors said to me, your only way in is if you actually learn about something, and then you'll have something to write about. It didn't really appeal to me, I must admit. So I then started looking for another job that meant I wasn't going to be tied to a desk. And while I was at college, I'd done a bit of temp work at a surveying firm called Jones Lang Wootton. And so I had a few contacts there, and very fortunately I managed to get in just doing what would now be called a surveying technician, holding the wrong end of the tape measure, doing the grunt work on crunching numbers on valuations, arranging inspections, things like that. So I fell on my feet. It was pure chance that I ended up in real estate. Eventually started doing my at the good old College of Estate Management and evening classes at the Polytechnic of Central London, and was very close to becoming a qualified surveyor during the second year of my diary, when I realised if I got my letters, I'd probably do it for the rest of my life. And it wasn't, I knew by then it wasn't what I really wanted to do. But purely by chance, someone was launching a property weekly at the time. What is now called Property Week was called Chartered Surveyor Weekly in those days.
Good old CSW.
Good old CSW, yes. And when they launched it, one of their USPs was they would have people who worked in the industry on the team. So they hired a couple of guys from the surveying side of the industry. Myself, I managed to get in, which was a real bonus to me. I ended up doing what I wanted to do by a very circuitous route. I don't know if you know Lee Mallet. He was another ex-surveyor they hired. And I was on a month's notice at Jones Lang, got the job at CSW, and was told, the only thing we need from you is that you've got to be able to type by the time you arrive. So I spent a month learning how to operate an iron typewriter, rocked up in Fleet Street, and that's it. Suddenly I was a journalist. I'd finally arrived where I wanted to be.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
Real estate and journalism are integrally linked as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And from there, CSW, you moved on and eventually, sort of going via Retail Week, came to Shopping Centre magazine, which, now, coming up to, I'm thinking what years, it's coming up to 2 years now, isn't it, since you changed to Retail Destination?
Yes.
Rebranded.
That's something I'd only been fighting for 13 years before I finally had a publisher who'd agree to the change. That
was a bit of a reflection of the changes within the retail market as much as anything.
Absolutely. The shoppers and retailers don't draw a distinction between shopping malls and retail parks and high street shops. They're just shops as far as they're concerned. So why should we draw a slightly false distinction? There has been a long-term trend for retail places to become mixed-use places as well. So it's something we had to reflect. But I think the common thread through everything we write about is that we write about managed destinations. We're very much on the operational side of the industry rather than the occupational or the investment side. So anything that's got a sort of guiding managerial hand over it, so shopping malls, retail parks, leisure centres. We don't tend to write about standalone high street shops, although with the advent of BIDs, business improvement districts, there has been a degree of management, but it's not our primary beat.
Yeah. So who's your typical reader? What's their profile? What makes a good story for them?
Readership is split three ways. There's the biggest group are the owners and the operators, especially the centre management teams, the asset managers who are responsible for the day-to-day operation of these retail destinations. Next group are the service providers, security companies, FM companies, marketing companies who provide services to the managed destinations. And finally, the retailers, although sad to say they're a slightly dwindling group of readers at the moment. The number of head office property guys has been slashed over the past few years for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
In terms of stories, I suppose a mall changing hands or a new retailer in the market for shops were our meat and drink. Sadly, they're both a bit thin on the ground at the moment. But anything that affects the day-to-day work of the managers is what we focus on. I think that's our USP in some ways, that we're not necessarily a property magazine and we're not necessarily a retail magazine. We sit somewhere in between the two, and nobody else does.
Yeah. And so during the lockdown and the pandemic so far, have you seen a change in the number of readers? Is it and subscribers and visits to the website? Has that gone up, gone down, stayed the same?
I'd like to say that our business has grown, but I don't think that's the case actually. And readership's held up reasonably well, but we've got to be realistic. Magazine subscriptions are going to be under review. Everyone's trying to conserve cash. Everyone's trying to cut costs. So when subs come up for renewal, it's a harder battle to get people to renew. So the onus is on us really to provide value for money and to provide the content that is compelling enough for people to make that leap of faith in what's quite a difficult time.
Yeah, and you obviously, some of the things you do as well as publishing the magazine and writing stories, you have the Scepter Awards each year, and you also partner with Revo for their Destination R conference. Now, unfortunately, that was cancelled pretty much the same time as MIPIM this year. The event in March was cancelled. I'm guessing they're going forward planning for March 2021, but also you've got your Scepter Awards which take place annually, and your deadline is for entries is just over a month away now, isn't it? So that's still in the planning, so fingers crossed. Have you got any updates on either of those?
Destination R is a JV, as you said, between Retail Destination and Revo, the retail property trade body. March was the absolute crunch time. There was no way we were going to get 600 people in a room in Birmingham. We would have looked at rescheduling for the autumn. The problem is that Revo, our partner, have their own big event in the autumn. Well, it's late September in Manchester. So they didn't really have the resources to put into it. Their own event is obviously their priority. So March 21, probably back in Birmingham, although that depends whether the NEC is still a Nightingale Hospital by then.
Of course.
So we are quietly working towards that date on that. The Scepter Awards are a much more urgent priority, as you rightly pointed out. We've got a venue booked in central London for the very beginning of October. Now, who knows? We're working to that date, and we're very hopeful we're going to be able to deliver it, but we're in the hands of the government. Yeah. And at the moment, large gatherings indoors in slightly airless banqueting halls in big London hotels are not permitted. I think we're quite away from them being permitted, but we've got 3 months for that to change.
Yeah. Well, you say your closing date for the entries is the 14th of August. So hopefully you'll get some nominations and you'll have some winners, and you can always send them the award, even if you can't celebrate it over a sumptuous meal.
Well, I think that would be a slightly joyless way of doing it, wouldn't it? I mean, part of the attraction of those big events is actually seeing people celebrating with their colleagues, with their peers, when their success is recognised. Yeah. And I think it's just something arriving on the doormat in an envelope one morning wouldn't quite have the same impact.
This is true. But well, good luck to everyone who enters. We've touched on MAPIC, which is obviously one of the big events in the calendar, along with MIPIM, which was, as we said, cancelled this year. You have been editing the daily news for MIPIM and MAPIC now for a number of years, which is great because you sit in the dark depths or the heights of the bunker down at the Palais Festival. How do you see that going this year? Are you going to be in Paris? Are you going to be producing a news magazine or a publication of some description? And I also wondered what your feelings are for these big events going forward. Will they ever be the same again, do you think, with tens of thousands of people rocking up for a few days in the sun?
First of all, MIPIM has transformed into the Paris Real Estate Week in the middle of September, but those plans don't include a daily paper. I don't think it's going to be that kind of event. We'll be covering it online, just as we're covering the build-up online. But looking further ahead, the daily magazines are still very much part of the mix once the shows resume in Cannes. As to what they're going to be like, I think it would be naive to think they're not going to be affected. But there's still massive fixtures on the property calendar for a lot of people right across Europe. And the chance of heading to the Côte d'Azur for a bit of sun in late autumn and early spring is always going to be attractive. So the events will happen. I think there'll be more respect to social distancing to begin with, at least until we found a way around COVID-19, whether that's mass vaccination or herd immunity. But in the short term, at least they're going to feel different. And I think over time, and this is something that was already beginning to happen, they're going to evolve into more of a year-round calendar of sort of interactive events rather than a big blockbuster once a year thing. I think people will engage more through the year, online, perhaps in print as well. So yeah, they're going to still be there, but they'll be different.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of COVID-19, which we're all learning still to cope with, despite sort of lockdown being eased in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, how do you see shopping changing and the impact it might have on retail destinations, if I can use your publication's name in the phrase?
No, it's great.
How do you see that kind of having that impact on where we shop?
Sadly, I think it's going to take a lot of the fun out of it. Managers aren't going to be encouraging people to loiter in the way that once upon a time they did. Dwell time was one of the big measures, one of the big KPIs for retail destinations. Now, the opposite is always true, that you want people to shop more efficiently, to get in, get what they need, and get out and make room for somebody else. So yes, slightly less relaxed, I suspect. I can't see many big events. I mean, as we normally October, November, you see the Christmas lights switch-ons in high street and in shopping centres. I can't see them hiring some winner from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, or the X Factor or whatever to come along and press a big red button and suddenly the lights come on. I think things are going to be a lot more low-key. Experiential had been the buzzword as well, hadn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's gone for the time being. It's mission-based shopping now.
Yeah. I heard some figures earlier this week, and we'll come on to rent collection in a minute, but people saying that the regional shopping centres and smaller developments were seeing perhaps more activity in terms of spend, but even though footfall was down, which I thought was interesting. It sort of comes back to this pushing people through as quickly as possible. But it seemed some of the figures coming back from the property managers was that actually the retail spend was a little bit higher, which is interesting. Yeah, British Land highlighted that as well in their numbers yesterday. I think it ties in. It's mission-based, isn't it? People know what they want to get. They go and get it. They get out. Which for a lot of people, it will be a wrench. I mean, for a large number of people, browsing, wandering slightly aimlessly around the shops and seeing what you happen upon has become a weekly ritual. And that habit has been broken by the lockdown. And the people aren't going to be encouraged to behave in that way going forward. So, but yes, spend per head I'm sure is higher. In terms of locations, people are nervous about public transport, so they're shopping locally. They're rediscovering local destinations that they hadn't visited for years, which is a good thing for some of the smaller centres out there. But the big city centre locations haven't come back to the same degree. Yeah.
And no, I don't know if that's a permanent shift.
Well, obviously that's perhaps one of the influences of the time, which is part of the big stories really at the moment, one of which is the collection of rent and rates during lockdown. Obviously, there's been various political things which have been going on in the background, but figures published this week by Remit Consulting for rent collection on June quarter day, obviously really down a long way. There were 35.5% for June quarter day collected on the day. That's compared to 41% in March. And service charge was down as well. And Vivian King, the chief executive of Revo, called on the government to provide some financial support on rents to restore stability to the retail property ecosystem, which I think is, a big worry for everyone. And obviously the other big story is going into administration. And, they own 9 of the top 20 shopping malls in the UK. So that's it's a huge chunk of space there where there is a certain degree of uncertainty. How do you see this all panning out in terms of the impact for retailers, shoppers, and the market in general?
To take your first point on rent collection, I think those remit numbers are quite optimistic. Hammerson was 16%.
Yeah.
It's clear that some of the retailers have decided to conserve cash by not paying rent, even when they could pay rent. There are retailers who can't pay the rent, and I think everyone has to recognise that. But I think there's another group that, if push came to shove, could pay the rent and have chosen not to. And that's a fundamental breakdown in trust between landlords and tenants. And it's going to take a long time to heal those relationships. So going forward, I think there's going to be a fundamental reappraisal of the landlord-tenant relationship, a fundamental rebasing of rents. But legally, that's very hard to achieve. People are tied into binding legal contracts to pay a certain amount of rent, in some cases for 25 years plus.
Do you think we may see an increase in sort of turnover rents and that kind of structure?
Yeah, I think we will. I think it's already been happening. I think that will accelerate. And I think a lot of people will take comfort from what's been the norm in the outlet sector. And actually some of the big players in mainstream retail, like Land Securities, like Hammerson, are also big players in outlet retail. And they're very happy to deal in short-term licenses and turnover rents on those properties, but somehow they've resisted doing it on their mainstream malls. I don't think they're going to be able to resist that anymore. I think it's going to become the norm. But it totally depends on transparency from the retailers. Mm-hmm. Retailers have to disclose their turnover if they're going to pay turnover rent. And for some, that's going to be a wrench. It's not been the way they've done business in the past.
And on Into, what do you think I saw a diagram the other day of all the financial structures, which is mind-boggling, and that was
it's like a cat's cradle, isn't it? All those arrows going in different directions.
Lots of arrows and lots of numbers flying around. It's such a huge amount of real estate from the retailing point of view. It's incredible to think that it's happened almost.
Yes, it is a huge event for the industry, but I'm not sure it wouldn't have happened anyway. I think it was coming before the pandemic. The pandemic was the final nail, if you like, in Intu's coffin. But I think it's partly is that financial complexity that, for want of a better phrase, they were too clever by half. And unfortunately, other people who run their businesses in a different way are suffering the fallout. I mean, the biggest impact of Intu's collapse into administration has been the impact on confidence in the rest of the sector. I mean, everyone's looking over their shoulder now, wondering who's going to be next. Yeah. I don't think the full impact's been felt either. The valuations haven't come through yet. Valuers are invoking material uncertainty clauses, and it's only when there's some market evidence, perhaps from the sale of some of the Into properties that will get a firmer handle on how badly they have hit the valuation of retail places.
Yeah, it's a very difficult time for everyone. We need a bit of optimism, I think, sometimes. And you are a natural optimist, Graham. You have to be, because you're a supporter of Charlton Athletic, and
yes,
you're cut out for that. And I, as we're nearly coming up to our time allocation here, I thought I'd ask you about Charlton Athletic. Big night tonight. Your home derby against Millwall. You know, those people listening to it will be able to look back. Oh, yeah, that was the score. But it is currently lunchtime on the 3rd of July, so the kickoff is in a few hours' time. How do you see it, Graham? What is your prediction?
Well, my biggest prediction is that I won't be at the Valley. I won't be heading off to the pub early to get suitably lubricated. So I deal with victory and defeat with equal disdain. So yeah, it's always a very tough game for us. I mean, I've got a lot of friends and family who are Millwall supporters, so it's always an emotionally charged time, this big derby. And then when we're only 3 miles apart as clubs, but have a mutual hatred that's gone back for a century. The only thing you need to know is that Charlton always lose. And so, as a rule, before lockdown, I was forecasting we'd lose 2-0 to my cousin Mike, who I always have a bet with about the game. Going forward, I think that may change. I think playing in an empty ground without the pressure from the crowd, because it's a very febrile atmosphere in the derby, I think we might stand a better chance. We might only lose 1-0.
So, do you think you're going to avoid relegation? That's the next big question.
Yeah, I think we've done enough. Got 2 wins and a draw from our first 3 games back.
You did. That's good.
And with the shenanigans going on, Wigan facing a points deduction, I think if we can get a point a game out of the remaining 6 games, I think we'd be safe. It's a horrible calculation to have to make, but it's something that most football fans have to deal with, isn't it?
Well, indeed. But I'm feeling particularly smug because Plymouth Argyle were promoted. There you go. Yeah,
and Exeter are in trouble.
Exeter didn't make promotion; they lost in the playoff. What a shame. Probably edit that bit out.
Exeter, the Millwall of the Southwest.
Indeed. So just to wrap things up, I'm interested in what you're going to be doing. What's the first place you're going to go to that you haven't been able to go to after lockdown has been lifted? I asked Robin Marriott this question the other week and asked him his favourite building. So I wondered whether I could ask you your favourite buildings or building, your favourite city, and which restaurant or I'd say pub you'll be going to when they all open up, which is potentially tomorrow.
Yes. Favourite building is probably the pavilion at the Oval. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to go there again. I suspect I'm not going to be able to go there till next year.
The last time I went into the central London was to sleep on the roof of the pavilion at the Oval for Land Aid, and it was very, very cold.
It is. It's quite a long way up, isn't it? It's got to be 8 stories high.
Yeah. But, sorry, it's a lovely building. Not such a comfortable bed, though.
No, but it's a very comfortable place to sit and watch cricket, I have to say. So I'm looking forward to seeing some cricket. The Oval, because it's local to me. Canterbury, I suppose, is my spiritual home as a Kent supporter. Above all of those is my local cricket club, Beddington. So, although I have been, it seems it's right outside my front door, I have been pacing around the pitch every day during lockdown, imagining games of cricket. So that's where I'd love to be. Where I'm looking forward to going, apart from that, is probably my local. And I have booked a place because they've opened for bookings today, but not till next Friday. because I've got a lot of work to do. I'm not going over the weekend because it'll be madness, and I've got too much work to do next week, to be honest. So next Friday, when the work's over, I've already booked my place Friday lunchtime at the Hope in Charlton, and I can't wait.
Excellent. Graham, thank you very, very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Good to catch up. Hopefully we will be able to enjoy a pint or two in each other's company in the not too distant future.
Or even a glass of rosé in can. That would be nice.
A glass of rosé in can. It's got my name on it. Okay. Graham Parker, many, many thanks indeed, and good to talk to you.
Paddy, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.